The year is now 2025, but we're going back to 1998. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Tape Deck Selects. Yo, what's going on, everybody? This is your boy, Lord Pooba, back again with another episode of Tape Deck Selects. I want to thank y'all for coming back to the channel and checking out what I got to do. Before I forget, Happy New Year. There are a few albums that stood out to me that I wanted to hear. Some may come unbeknownst to you, at least one of them. But the three albums that I'm going to review today, at least one of them are OGs in the game right now. You know, we're talking, this is 20 some odd years ago. But some of these guys are OGs in the game right now. Some of these guys you may have heard of. Some of these guys you may have heard the songs and not recognize who they were. But nonetheless, I got a list. It's sitting right here. And we're going to go through them. You ready? Let's go. All right, so boom, let's get right into it. January 20th, 1998. Young Bleed, No Limit artist. He came out with his album, My Balls, My Word. Again, No Limit release. This is when Master P and No Limit were absolutely on fire. If you don't know, Young Bleed made the song How You Do That there. I think the South was like really, really big on it, and they might perceive it differently than we did over here, but that song was definitely fire. I believe that song was debuted on the Bout It soundtrack. I'm Bout It soundtrack, so he came in kind of highly anticipated, but for me, I don't think, at least where I'm from, it didn't do too well. It wasn't received too well, but that song is definitely a classic. How You Do That there. If you haven't heard it, make sure you go check it out because that song is definitely a classic. The features on the album, again, mostly No Limit. You know what I'm saying? This is what Master P was doing at the time. It's like anybody who was on No Limit was on everybody else's project. Almost similar to a Death Row kind of regimen where it's like, hey, everybody get on this track, or this person sounds good on this track, this person sounds good on that track. The producers on that album wasn't a whole lot. I thought KLC, because he was like the in-house producer for No Limit around that time, I thought he might have had a little bit more to do with this album. But no, it wasn't just him. He might have had like one or two tracks on there. You had a fella who went by the name of Happy Perez. He pretty much did the majority of the album. And then you had Moby Dick. That was another guy. He sung as well. He definitely sung on No Limit, but he had a rap album too. I don't think he's the one. I think Sons of Funk sung I Got the Hookup. I Got the Hookup. Right? I think he did that, but he definitely had tracks where he was singing like Thinking About You. If you guys remember that No Limit song, Thinking About You, he definitely sung on that. He was on that. But Moby Dick actually had one of the better albums that was on No Limit as well. I'm pretty sure he's coming up later in the years because it was a fantastic year for No Limit. As far as my favorite tracks off this album, number one is going to be How You Do That. You know, that's, again, a classic from the way it come on to the way it just carried the bass line. His flow on that song just captivated everything, and it kind of made him a legend in that moment. Master P got on the track, and Master P was probably the bigger artist on that track, and he had a flow in it that was crazy. You know, you can go back and check that out. That's definitely on the list. Then it's the second track, and No Limit had a thing for this. No Limit would get on whatever artist they had. That second track was always a banger, no matter who it was. Everybody from this guy, Young Bleed, Skullduggery, Soulja Slim, Mac, Mystical, Master P himself, C Murder, whoever, Silk the Shocker, all of those guys, Mia X. That second track was always a hit. So that second track definitely sucked you in that you wanted to hear the rest of the album. Now, whether it went up or down, we don't know. But the second track off this album, which was called Bring the Noise, I think that had Mystical on it. And Mystical was on fire. Absolute fire around that time. That track was dope. Then he had a last track on there called Ghostwriter. They sampled the Tubular Bells, which was like the main theme in The Exorcist. You go back and listen to The Exorcist, and you hear like the bells playing in the background. They sampled that. If that wasn't the last track, it was one of the last tracks, and it was cool. Like I had to grab another one. I ain't want to do them. It was, those are the three tracks that I like. You know what I'm saying? So those three tracks for sure were definitely hitting off that album. It's not something that I would play consistently. You know, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not hating, but anyway, moving on. All right, so January 13th, 1998. a hitter. No, I'm not gonna say a hitter. These guys were so cool. Like, they were so fun. They were so cool. They came out. I believe this is their third album. There's a group called Funkdoobiest, and the name of the album was called The Troubleshooters. Right? So a lot of people might not know. Like, if you're a real hip hop head, like real underground, like into it, especially like early 90s hip hop, they had a couple of songs back then, because I think their first album was released in 1993 or 1994, one of the two. Which it was called, don't tell me, it was called Would You Do Be You Be, or something like that. These guys were fun. Let's just get into that. Let's just talk about the album. Troubleshooters, the features they had on the album, following a very similar format to No Limit, was the second track off the album had Daz Dillinger. You know, Daz Dillinger, Dog Pound. This is 98. I think 97, he dropped one of his solo albums that was pretty fire. But Daz Dillinger was riding lightning that year too. He was on there. Cam from Cam and Solo. This is completely West Coast stuff. You know what I mean? Ski, Crumb Snatcher, coming back to the East Coast. We had Tony Touch on that album, and God Rest the Dead, he had Hurricane G on that album. You know, the producers, once again, we're talking DJ Ralph. I'm sorry, let me put some respect on that. DJ Ralph M. Then we had Dub M Tape, WM Tape, for those who don't understand my slang. Went into Ski, of course. Ski is a pretty dope producer. Ray Roll, DJ Rectangle, and the Beat Miners, which I was kind of shocked to see as a part of the production clique on this album. Very, not misleading, but it's kind of weird, because in the beginning of that album, they say, like, live from New York, you know, the crazy Puerto Ricans and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, so these guys are from New York, and they kind of give you like a Beat Nuts feel. It's like a, yeah. They remind you of the Beat Nuts a very little bit, but then the flow is definitely not Beat Nuts. Even some of the beats were Beat Nut-ish, and I wouldn't be surprised if, like, I think Psycho Les did the beats for the Beat Nuts, or was it Juju? Junkyard Juju. I know Junkyard Juju does some beats, but whoever did the beats for the Beat Nuts, I said beat like mad times. But anyway, it kind of puts you in that feel, like that real retro, lo-fi ordeal. Some of the tracks, not all of them, but some of the tracks. But it puts you in the mind state of them. But they're from, it's a West Coast sound at the end of the day, and they hail from the West Coast. Where, I'm not 100% sure. Maybe somebody in the crowd could help me out. But they definitely hail from the West Coast, but easily confused with like an East Coast kind of feel, you know. My favorite tracks off this album, it was Natural Fun, that was fire. Papi Chulo, that was the second track that includes Daz Dillinger. That junk was fire. Crazy Puerto Ricans was a dope track. And Sunshine was fire. Sunshine is definitely one of the tracks that puts you in like that East Coast feel, but just know that these guys are from the West Coast. You'll hear it in the flow. I would listen to this album again. This album is definitely, if it pops up in your rotation, you put your, if you got a lot of music like how I got in my collection, and you just put it on shuffle and it comes on, you're not going to be upset. You can just let it ride out, you know. These guys were just, you know, they had fun with the craft. You know, it was when rap was, you could still have fun with rap. It wasn't like, you know, guns and drugs and all types of weird stuff like that. It was just a good album to listen to. It was fun. You could hear them having fun with the craft. And I would listen to it again. And you could actually go to the Friday soundtrack. Let me think about this, because this is where you guys are going to recognize this group, because most people probably won't even know that this group had anything to do with it. On the Friday soundtrack, they have a song on there called Super Ho. I think it was Super Ho. But if that wasn't it, it was the scene where Debo knocked out Ray. The song playing in the background, that was Funkdoobiest, so you can always go back and check that too. So, not going to drag this out for too much longer, because YouTube got me on a short leash, so we're going to keep it pushing. Moving on. All right, so last but not least, same release date as the last artist I covered, January 13th, 1998. This one was a big deal. We had The Lox, Money, Power, Respect, the Bad Boy album, the one that kind of set them off. Now, they already been putting in work in the industry, you know, making a name for themselves as like these bona fide spitters and everything like that. They was already on like the main Source albums, and they did a bunch of freestyles, Funk Flex freestyles, DJ Clue freestyles, just being scattered all over the industry. Like this was Bad Boy's answer to like, oh, you guys, you know, after Biggie passed, of course. I mean, of course they was on tracks with Biggie too, but it was like after Biggie passed, what do you got? Now we got The Lox. Shouts to everybody else who's on the label, Mace, Craig Mack, all of that different stuff. But The Lox, that was the breath of fresh air. That was their first joint through all the controversy, through all the, you know, whatever. They laid some shit they laid some stuff down during this time, and this is their first album. Let's get into it. The features, we had a pre-album DMX. DMX didn't have an album out around this time, but he was on the album for the title track, Money, Power, Respect. Same thing with Lil' Kim. Lil' Kim had albums out, but she was on Money, Power, Respect. I think that's where most of the energy was focused on in that song. Of course, Diddy was on the album. You had Kelly Price, you had Carl Thomas. And I think that pretty much sums up the features on the album, because I feel like when you actually are rapping and you're good at it, you don't need a whole lot of features until maybe the second or third album, where people want to hear you rap with other people who the fans are comparing you to, you know. So we had that going on. Producers, D-Dot, the mad rapper, Angeletti, love his production. He doesn't get enough flowers. Diddy, of course, Dame Grease, this is another one. Love his production. He doesn't get enough flowers. 6 July, he's a silent assassin. He did a couple of things. My boy just hit me and told me that he did a chunk of Royce da 5'9's Death Is Certain album, I believe. And he also did a couple of tracks on Cannabis' second album, which was called 2000 BC. He did a good majority of tracks on there. That's 6 July. Young Lord, Stevie J. Yes, Stevie J does more than just make weird faces on reality sitcoms and stuff like that. He was on that bad boy team, you know what I'm saying, doing things. Swiss Beats and Amin Ra. And just to stick with the production for a hot second, it was cool, but when they left, that's when the sound matched the vocals. Like, if you're listening to this album at the time, it was like, you know, Bad Boy just wasn't really for the Lox, if that makes sense. Like, the Bad Boy image clashed with the image that the Lox gave off. It clashed with the stories that the Lox gave off. They weren't, you know, the shiny suit campaign, let's, you know, let the Lox go, all of that stuff. That was a thing because it made sense. It didn't match. My favorite tracks off this album, and this is a quick little side story, one of my favorite tracks from the Lox off this album is If You Think I'm Jiggy. The sample Johnny Guitar Watson, I forgot what song it was, but I heard the small piece that they took and I always thought that was fire. They took the hook from Rod Stewart, If You Think I'm Sexy. I always thought that was cool, especially the way they flipped it. First time I really heard that song and listened to it like wholeheartedly, it was like on All That back in the day. Like, they performed on All That, and I thought that was like, looking back at it now, I was like, this is the weirdest stuff. Like, All That, y'all real for that. Y'all had a lot of real artists come out there and perform for us, and I respect that. The Lox was on All That, for sure. That's definitely one of my favorite tracks. I'm going to skip over this one because, I'm going to skip over. I'm going to come back to it. Bitches from Eastwick, that's when they displayed storytelling skills. I always thought that was fire. Gonna Be Some Shit, that was on the album. That was more like a Chic Luch solo track. And I thought Chic is like my favorite Lox member. Like, everybody likes Jada, everybody likes Styles. And then when the mixtapes came out, it was all about, like, you know, really Styles held the helm when it came to the mixtapes. You had like Ghost in the Machine, G-Host, Ghost in the Shell, all of that stuff in style. It was magnificent. The whole D-Block era with the mixtapes and everything like that, it was magnificent. But Sheik was always like my favorite artist. I don't know, probably because he threw the wrestling references in there too. You know, Sheik Luch, the Morocco rap, all of that kind of stuff. Sheik did well in all of that stuff, and we can have a conversation about that later on about Sheik Luch. Then it was Not to Be Fucked With by Styles P. That track was hard. That was Styles' solo joint on that album. It's like they gave you they gave you like a sample of what each one of them can bring, especially since later on down the line they all gave you solo albums, and it was like, this is like a little test, a little taste of what all of us are going to do separately. And of course, you know, All for the Love with Jadakiss, that's always been a hood classic, hood favorite off that album. Going back though, a lot of people sitting back, if you're watching this, you're probably like, well, what about Money, Power, Respect? Money, Power, Respect was dope, and it grew on me. But when it very, very first came out, I was not a fan of Money, Power, Respect. I don't know what it was. I'm weird like that. Like, everybody, oh, Money, Power, Respect, what you need in life, money, and all of that. And I'm like, yeah, it didn't really hit me like that. Like, I only used to like it when DMX came on, because his verse was just so hard. I really just like DMX and Styles verse. Those are the two that I get the hype, you know, because it's a hype song. It's definitely a hype song. And that's what I used to get the hype with the most. So it's like Money, Power, Respect grew on me over the years, but coming out the gate off this album, yes, it was one of the tracks that you listen to because that's what they shoved down your throat, but wasn't really my cup of tea when it first came out. But I can honestly say, 20 some odd years later, yes, Money, Power, Respect was dope. So there's that. All right. Those are the 3 albums that I have for you guys today. Give me 1 second. We'll be right back for the wrap up. All right, y'all. That's it. Those are the 3 albums that I decided to review that came out in January of 1998. Please like, follow, subscribe, share, all the good things. If I missed something, if it's an album that I missed that you guys want to talk about, throw it in the chat. Send me a DM, all of that good stuff. I'm going to start lacing y'all with all my social media antics, and you guys can reach me. I'm very tangible. Like, hey, you missed this album. Hey, what about that album? We could talk about it. Even if I didn't hear it, we could talk about it live if you want. I'm getting ready to move into the live sector of this kind of stuff. So, yeah, man, that's it. Next episode, we will definitely be moving into February, right? February, we're going to talk about the albums that came out in February. Can't really remember which ones they were, but I'm going to pick 3. If you guys got an opportunity, sit down and think about an album that came out in February and send it to me, and it'll be up for review, and it might be on the show. All right? Until then, like I said, like, follow, subscribe. Holla at your boy. Very tangible. I will answer emails. I will answer comments, all of that good stuff. But until the next time, peace.